Hello and welcome to the video, everybody. I am here today to talk about Axie Infinity runes and what I think the top 3 runes for every type of Axie are. I have just footage of Axie games I played in the background to hopefully make this more entertaining. But let's get started with this. Okay, so my first category here, I have Aquatic. So for the number 1 spot, I'm going to start with 1, then work my way down to 3. So for my number 1 spot, I have Bloodlust. So here for Bloodlust, in Season 4, this is a Mystic rune, by the way, and I'm ranking them, and this is just my opinion, not really what, like, Sky Mavis has and says. I mean, I think they try to keep Mystics above Epics and Rares, and I think all of that. But I may have, like, 1 Epic above a Mystic because I see how it could be used better. And, I mean, that's probably why you're not going to see any rare runes in this. Well, you're not going to see, I know for sure that you're not going to see a rare rune in this. Otherwise, I would have, like, overlooked something completely. Because rare runes are meant to be lesser than Epic runes, which are meant to be lesser than Mythic runes. And you can see where I'm going from there. But so in Season 4, Bloodlust used to steal 15 HP per single attack and steal 5 HP per multi-attack or multi-hit attack, which means you're dealing 15 bonus damage and healing 15 damage, and the same goes with multi-hit and multi-attacks. But it got buffed, so for Season 5, it's being changed that single attacks steal 21 HP per energy spent, multi-hit and AoE attacks steal 7 per hit. So now you're dealing more damage, and it's counting, like, how much damage you do. So if you have an Aquatic with, like, Little Branch on it, you're dealing 132 plus 21 damage healed and extra per the 2 energy you spent. So you're adding 42 bonus damage to the hit and healing 42 damage. So it's like it can really add up, and I think that is why it deserves the number 1 spot. Moving on, I have Giant Bubble for spot number 2. And if you don't know, Giant Bubble is an epic. So here is where I contradict the Mystic being higher than an epic. Giant Bubble, I think, is just better than Heart of Ocean, because Heart of Ocean I don't believe is extremely strong unless used in a very specific manner. Whereas Giant Bubble adds 1 Giant Bubble card to your deck, which is 0 energy, and you start with it, and you can retain it. And it says, shield all allies. Allied Axies gain 4 bubbles per energy spent. Energy card plus... And the energy cost increases +1 per turn it's retained. So it caps at 3 energy, but you can give all allies 12 bubbles if you retain it for 3 turns, and you go second. So if you go second there, and you retain it for these 3 turns, you can get 12 bubbles, so 2 bubble bombs and 2 bubbles right off the bat, which I think that assists the teams much more, and it's not a banish either, so it's going to keep coming back. And this is just like I think something really big that can mix up games and, like, throw your opponent off really early on by throwing out damage. And if you already, like, rack up bubbles, it's just a lot. And I think it's hard for the opponent to handle. And with Sponge's price coming down, you could add Sponge to the mix. You're only able to make 3 bubble bombs max with the Sponge, but is coming down from a cost of 3 down to 2. Shield is less, but I don't think that matters so much out of Sponge, because the Sponge is just, like, adds bubble bombs, and then you have so many. And if you add that with a bunch of, like, team bubble generating cards, those are AoE, and that's a lot of AoE damage, which could be counterdicted a little bit with our next rune. The third and final rune I'm hitting on today for the Aquatic category is called Heart of Ocean. So it reads, when your turn starts, this Axie gains 1 bubble. Bubble bomb detonated by this Axie deal 50% bonus damage. So the damage is marked up from 24 damage per bubble bomb detonated dealt to all of your opponent Axies goes up to 36 damage, which is good, but I think that Giant Bubble's ability to just like rack up more bubbles is better. That's why I've put it above the Heart of Ocean Mystic rune. But I mean, if you disagree with me, comment in the comment section below. If you believe that Hardy Warrior should be higher and might replace Giant Bubble, also comment. Because I do understand that Hardy Warrior looks very good and is really good, but you have to have a very specific card set layout and a lot of good charms to go with it that make it like really good rather than just good. And I believe Giant Bubble's ability to like rack up bubbles, like I said before, just outplays Heart of Ocean or any of the other epic runes, just not Bloodlust. But that'll be all for the aquatic section. Continuing on to the next category, I have the category of beasts. So, just before I get into what I think the best one is, I know you all might disagree with me and say that Glorious Mane is the absolute best, there's no way to counter it, it's just awful. And yes, it is being debuffed, so it's not as overpowered, but I still think it was never as good as everyone said it was. Because there are so many ways to counter it and so many ways to attack any Axie that you want, it's not that hard to hit. But, despite me saying that, it is still on this list. But to start, I have Brutal Claw as the number one beast rune, and it is a mystic. So it says, on targets with less than 6 bleed, single and AoE attacks double the bleed turns on those targets. Otherwise, create Bloodstorm. So Bloodstorm subtracts 1 bleed from the target, then all enemy Axies lose 15 HP. So I believe Bloodstorm, like, that happens whenever the target attacks, but then everyone on that Axie's ally team loses 15 HP. So it's like bleed for everyone. And I just believe it's really good because it's also, like, never-ending bleed. If you pair it with, like, Nyan, I know is one for certain. Chubby, too, would be awful. Because, especially if you paired it, like, well, you could Chubby with one without this rune, and then Chubby again, and you're adding 4 more. And then you're creating a Bloodstorm on everyone. And that would just be awful, honestly. And those are just like how I think it should be played. I'm a fan of a very large death mark. I might have some footage of it coming up eventually. But yeah, like multi-chubby. Like those sorts of things would work with this rune. And it's just going to... I think it might be really good coming up on the season and... just always, I mean, it's been pretty good for a while. And I think with how everything's shifting for, like, poison teams, it might be a good counter to poison because the more you play cards, the more damage you take all around. And then it puts Beast Axies back, like, in the competitive realm. Whereas Reptile Axies are really getting a boost with the poison being buffed so much for... this season 5. I think there's a lot. There's going to be a lot of poison players, but Brutal Claw is one to try this out for. Now moving on to the number 2 spot, I have Endless Anger. And Endless Anger says, when your turn starts, this Axie gains 2 rage. Rage on this Axie now grant 2 bonus damage per stack. So Endless Anger is a very good way to get Fury very early on, dealing a bunch of extra bonus damage from the rage, and then also just like destroying the enemy Axies. You could hit like 2. I have Endless Anger, and I used it on Bubba, and I could hit 2 rages per game, just Bubba, very easily. And then also, I could possibly get a third, depending on like what the team is and what they're trying to do against me. But other than Bubba, you might want like a Little Branch Shiba mix with Endless Anger, and then you can get a lot of rage rolling. And with those like multi-energy, like high attacks, you're dishing off so much damage. It's hard to counter. Like if it's impossible to counter. I mean, it's not impossible to counter. You can just take them out. It is. The only problem with it is that when you have rage, for the amount of stacks of rage, you also take extra damage. So you have extra damage coming in on you fast, but I don't think that's enough to balance it out. I think it was very close. Endless Anger, which is a Mystic Rune, I forgot to mention. Endless Anger and Brutal Claw, but I think Brutal Claw just barely makes it above Endless Anger. But it's really a toss-up. Coming in at third place, surprise, surprise, is Glorious Mane. So Glorious Mane says, this Axie's attacks no longer grant energy spasm, but their base damage is increased by 8% per energy spent whenever this Axie attacks. So it is being debuffed and nerfed is what it is called. It's being nerfed from 10% to 8% per energy spent, but I still think it is a very viable rune. I think used in a proper composition, it can just destroy the enemy and dish off like a lot of damage really early on that the enemy can't really deal with that well. I think it is a very good rune for starters and lower ranks especially, because like around the Tiger area, possibly going up into like low dragon, but especially in like Tiger and below, there's not many people that have like a bunch of really good runes that can counter Glorious Mane, and paired with like a good healing team, shielding team, you can't like, it's really hard to get to the actual attacker and actually take him out. And even if you pair it with like some good damage, if the enemy doesn't have a team that is focused on targeting whoever they want and dealing select damage, but they have sun cards, you don't really need to worry that much. Heal them occasionally, but the Glorious Mane healer is not going to be taken out very often. And it's just like, you can also attack back because it's hard to cycle through the cards. I know I was playing a game recently and it was like I just couldn't do it. But yeah, there's the beast category. Okay, so hopping in for the last category today, we have birds. So for the birds, I really like all of the runes for birds. I'm a pretty big fan of the bird and like multi-hit attack, chain attacks. I like it. Birds and dawns are my favorite two categories. But for number one, I have Feather Descent. And it's a mystic rune. I think it's very good. It says, when your turn starts, this Axie gains 2 feathers. If the Axie has 10 stacks, add Feather Dagger in the hand until it's full. When your turn ends, the Axie loses feather equal to the number of Feather Dagger added in this round. So feathers, dealing all the bonus damage they do, if you can really rack up feathers and rack up feather damage, Feather Daggers are insane, because they can deal 25 damage per hit for 0 energy. And if you have the right cards, they deal like, you just throw out, I threw out 6 one round. I have it recorded, I think. I'll put it on one of these videos at some point. I think the Dawn one will have like a Dawn feather generator. But it was like insane. I dealt 150 damage with just Feather Dagger. So I dealt 150 damage with 0 energy, coming off of like gaining a bunch of, I think I spent 5 energy to get my 20 max damage, because I changed a bunch of little owls. And And it's just obnoxious, like, how many hits it takes. So, like, when will it stop? Can you please stop? And adding so many feathers, you're not really going to lose all of them. I mean, the new way feathers work, if you don't use a feather, which, I mean, if you're hit 10 times, so you can counter a bird with a bird. Basically, that's how you counter it. Otherwise, with Feather Descend, you're not really going to be able to counter it very easily. Coming up next, I have Raven's Tactic. So it says, when your turn starts, consume all feather on self to heal your team for 1 HP per feather. Deal 15% bonus damage, bonus 15% damage per hit this Axie deals until the end of the turn. The cap is 2 hits, so you can deal up to 45% bonus damage. Okay, you don't have your feather. So what? You're hardly healing, sure. But the bonus damage, like, late game, if you take, like, triple little Alparts and you use them all and you have 6 hits, and you're dealing about 50% bonus damage for each of that, you're not dealing 120 damage, now you're dealing 180 per 1 energy spent. That's a lot. And, see, like, it depends how you use it and what you have on. So if you have, like, a bird with, like, single attack, maybe not so much, but when you can, like, gain multi-hits and like, chain off a bunch of hits for, like, 1 energy, that's where this really shines through. This is a Mystic Rune. And, yes, it deserves to be up here, but it's just insane. And also, yeah, I see my footage now. I have my Feathered Dagger attack up here. This may or may not be the one that I use the whole 25 damage on, but yeah. I mean, besides the point, you don't have any feather now to gain the bonus damage, but I said forget it, you got 45% bonus damage. So if you use a little owl, it goes 1 hit 15% bonus damage, 2 hit 30% bonus damage, 3, 4, 5, 6, all 45% bonus damage. It's just a lot. It's really, really hard to counter. And it might... This is why I think it's lesser than Feather Descend, because actually the multi-chain attacks do deal more damage if you have max, like, feather added bonus damage, where that's now 100% bonus damage. But it could be on, like, the higher, like, single hit attacks, but you could also use it on, like, a bird that has really high attack, and then chain it with some other damage bonuses. And then it's a cause for concern, because now I have to deal with something ridiculous. And there, it's just like, please stop. That's a lot of damage. Please stop. And it just doesn't stop, because you're using so little energy, but dealing more damage. Now, yes, I said it would be much better, and it is much better if you chain it with other damage bonuses, like, oh, I can't rattle them off the top of my head right now, but there's, like, yeah, I don't remember them. But anyway, moving on to number 3. So over here in the number 3 spot is Sacred Feather. And it is a very good epic rune. I wouldn't be surprised if it gets nerfed at some point, but, I mean, I actually gotta check really quick. I don't think it was nerfed. 1 second. Nope, it wasn't nerfed. Okay, so we're good. So, Sacred Feather is, once per battle, if this Axie would die, it survives with 1 HP, then heals 5% of its max HP. For each feather, afterward, deal 20 damage to all enemies. So with this, if you have max feather, which is 10, then you're using Sacred Feather, and you're going and healing 50% HP. So this is just a very good way to, like, end game, backliner v backliner. You're about to die. You got 10 feather. Enemy's low. He kills you, but then can't compensate for the extra 200 HP that you just gained. It's, like, a little harsh. That's why I said, like, it should be nerfed. It is really good, but I don't believe that it deserves to be above Raven's tactic just because feathers vary, especially with the new, like, feather change. Like, if you're being attacked, it's less and less and less. So, and you might not have feather at all. This could save you because it's his last hit and then you're on 1 HP. And then you're like, I was spared, hooray. But besides that, it's very situational, which is the only problem with it. Because if it was, like, guaranteed, I'm always going to be surviving on, like, 50% more HP, so I'm gaining 200 HP every time, then it would be like, it either needs to be nerfed or become a mystic, because then it's really good. But besides that, it's decent, and it's definitely better than, like, Sharp Talon or Energy Guru, because they're, like, it can't be used as good, and, like, if you have Sharp Talon or Sacred Feather, and you're like, well, I could choose Sharp Talon, at the higher ranks, you're gonna have teams that will, like, take out your Sharp Talon Axie because it's like you're dealing too much bonus damage. But with Sacred Feather, it's like, well, if I take it out, then it's just gonna obnoxiously come back, and I'm wasting my time right now. But then if you leave it too long, it will come back. And especially paired with, like, a healing team, if someone goes for it right off the bat because, like, I want to get this out of the way, you can heal it back up to max HP. So they did waste their time. And I think that is where it becomes a very good rune. It may or may not need to be nerfed. I don't think it does right now. It's not awfully strong. But, yeah. Well, that'll be the video. That was the Aquatic, Beast, and Bird runes that I think are the best top 3 for each. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you and have a good time. And just for the sake of it, I'll narrate this last little bit of this Axie Infinity Classic match that I have going on here. So I throw up 2 cards because I'm going before him. There's nothing he can do. If I just hit him twice, he's dead. I mean, I only need 1, but I felt like 2. I guess I wasn't thinking at the time. But I'm gonna wait here and wait. I know I'm gonna win. There's no way I lose. Especially looking at the 2 cards, like, there's no way I lose here. And I'll just keep waiting. It's not like I know what happens at the end or anything. He just does nothing, yeah. That's what happens, and bam. Hooray!